Hello and welcome at the AWS Community Day, the Netherlands 2025. My name is Martijn van Dongen, co-organizer of this event and AWS hero based in the Netherlands. You're watching the pre-recorded keynote featuring two guest speakers. First, we will hear from Danielle Gorlick, General Manager Benelux for AWS, followed by a fireside chat with Jeff Barr, Chief Evangelist for AWS. This day could not have happened with the help of many speakers, volunteers and sponsors. First our diamond sponsor, SentinelOne, and our gold sponsors, Schubert Phyllis, PostNL, NN, Levi9, Kloya and Cloudar, and our silver sponsors, Cloud Nation, ElasticScale, Inkido, Luminous, Red Hat, NetApp, Xebia and Booking.com. On November 8, 2017, we started this community with a true legend as our first speaker. Someone I believe would be another AWS hero based here in the Netherlands if he would not have joined AWS as an employee. He ran a public podcast, Bits vs Bytes, and spoke with many great leaders from our community and around the globe. Nowadays, he also runs a very popular podcast inside AWS. His name is Amer Grigic, and I reached out to him with a question. Could you record a fireside chat with one of your regional leaders here in Benelux? Of course he said yes, and I'm happy to welcome Amer together with Danielle Gorlick, the Managing Director Benelux for AWS.
Well, thank you so much, Martijn, for the kind words, and thank you for the community for being there. It's good to see the community has grown from the first time I was at a meetup until what it is right now. We're gonna have a little bit of a talk with Danielle, and first off, Danielle, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm going to be in Belgium at our public sector day. On the same day as this event, but I'm sure it's going to be a great one.
So you've been in the role for a year now. How was it? What happened? What are things that you've learned, and how was the last year?
Yeah, it was an amazing first year. I mean, time flies. I can't believe I've been living in the Netherlands actually for over a year now, and in the role for about a year and a half. Some of the reasons I was excited about the role in Benelux is previously I had worked in markets like Scandinavia, and countries like Netherlands and also Belgium have been really early adopters of cloud technology, really leaning into digital. And we see that with, companies like Booking.com or KBC Bank, that are actually really Showpad, Binder, that are leading the way not only in cloud adoption, but also what was a very hot topic was, of course, AI and generative AI last year. And what I see is that Dutch customers and also Belgian customers are really taking advantage of this technology at a much faster pace than their European peers. Belgium is a little bit ahead of the Netherlands. So the Netherlands has a bit of catching up to do. But yeah, that's been a really, really exciting space to be. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for AWS to really help these customers, completely transform their employee experience, the way that they're doing development to speed up the development process, not needing to do as many code reviews or some of the more maybe boring stuff in the development cycle. And then, of course, also, creating new business models as well.
And there's a lot of talk about like data localization and people wanting to have their data stored in the EU. What are we doing as AWS for that?
Yeah. So many of you will know this already, but AWS is sovereign by design. So what this means is that the way that we've built our regions, we've put security and the security of our customers' data at the forefront. So customers from day one, you choose the region that your data is stored, and it is not moved unless you do so yourself. You also have the opportunity to encrypt your data end to end, and you own the keys. And this is not just me saying this, but ISG has also ranked AWS as the leader in sovereignty above any other provider, including European providers. And that was even before we announced the European Sovereign Cloud that's going to be launching later this year. And this has been something that we've been working on for multiple years, so 2+ years, really listening to customers, especially initially from the public sector, saying that they need another level of data sovereignty for very, very specific workloads. So we are launching the European Sovereign Cloud, which is going to be essentially a completely separate cloud run by people in the EU. We've named the managing director, Catherine Renz, who's a German citizen, to really help customers meet those really stringent requirements.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good step for a lot of our customers because it is such a huge topic right now. Is there anything else that you would like to get to the people that are actually in the community day to day? Is there something that you want to give back to them for today?
Well, I really appreciate all of you being part of this community, coming to these events. I think it's an amazing opportunity to learn from peers, but also to really make sure that the Netherlands and Belgium continue to lead in Europe's digital future, because one of the biggest challenges to really taking advantage of new technologies like AI is actually around the skills. And so I think events like this and bringing the community together so that we can broaden the skills that we have on the market is really going to help contribute to the Netherlands economy and also the Belgian economy.
Well, nothing else to say than have a good day, everybody. And thank you for your time, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Enjoy the day, everyone.
5 years ago, we had Werner Vogels in an online AWS Community Day. In 2021, Jeff Barr joined us virtually. And in 2022, we had the pleasure of welcoming Werner Vogels live in Amersfoort. It's 2025 and I'm happy to welcome back Jeff Barr, Chief Evangelist at AWS.
To be here. I really love community days because of that word community in the middle. And this year I've actually been privileged to be able to speak at many community days. I wish I could go to absolutely every last one of them. If I didn't have a family, if I didn't have obligations locally here in Seattle, I could see the most fun year ever of just hopping from community day to community day worldwide. I keep thinking, could I make that happen? And it's like it's almost it's a dream. But the ones I can get to, I'm so happy to be at. And I love the fact that they're self-organized, that the people are so passionate and enthusiastic about the cloud that they just say, let's have an event to connect and celebrate and learn. And the interesting thing is that these folks generally don't have a detailed professional background as event organizers, and they're always a bit apologetic and like, oh, we don't know what we're doing, so we're trying our best and we're really sorry. And then you get there and it's the most amazing thing ever. It's like, wow, you all did amazing jobs. So you pat yourselves on the back for what you did, from usually the venues and the speakers and the content and all the 1,000 details it takes to make an event. People in the community just do amazing jobs.
If we go back almost 20 years ago, when the whole cloud, started. For me, it started a little bit later. I was working at a company, a digital agency. So we were building websites for enterprises. And at some point in 2012, 2013, I guess, we said, okay, we're going to only do cloud at this point. So no racking servers anymore. We are only working with public cloud at that point. So that was when my cloud journey started, but I believe your cloud journey started a bit earlier.
Yeah, I joined Amazon in 2002 when we were just getting started with web services. This predates AWS, but I joined up when at that point, this was early 2002, and we or they, kind of depending on whether I had joined or not, had just published some initial web services that gave developers access to the Amazon product catalog. And I'd been doing some consulting in the web services space, the web services world. And I saw this initial announcement from Amazon. I was really excited by it because it was one of the first practical applications of web services. There'd been a lot of things before that in the 2001 timeframe, but they were like, here's the weather, here's a currency conversion, here's a stock quote. And the developers would get all excited about the fact that, wow, we had a client and we had a server and we magically made them connect up across the internet. And it went through it went through port 80, so we didn't have to open up our firewall. And developers were like, wow, this is just the coolest thing ever. We made all this work. And then you'd show it to a business person or you'd show it to a venture capitalist. They're like, I don't see what's the amazing thing here. So it was very hard to capture and convey the value of these really early, certainly important web services. But this first Amazon Associates web service gave developers access to the product catalog, and it showed developers how they could pull data from the catalog. They could put it on their website. They could earn money from the Amazon Associates program. And I saw that very first service the day it was launched. I signed up for the beta. I started using it. I sent some feedback. I got invited to the main office to provide some more feedback. And before I knew it, I was part of the team that had built that service. And it was just one of these just amazing kind of things where a whole bunch of these low probability events actually line up. And you're like, wow, I got super lucky and did the right thing. It was in the right place at the exact right time, like 5 or 6 times in a row. And if I had to write the story, this would be the long chain of highly improbable events would be the absolute title of my memoirs, because you do all the right things. You learn, you put that learning into practice. You maybe share what you're doing on social media, but there's this timing aspect, and there's this. It's not quite luck, but there's this. You end up in the right situation sometimes, and then you say, "Wow, here I am in this perfect situation. What do I do to actually take advantage of it?" And sometimes I think when we talk about luck, and I actually have given a whole presentation just about this whole idea of like creating and cultivating luck. Like you want to design your life in a way that you are in these interesting situations where maybe there's a particular opportunity for you to meet a person or make a request or do some specific thing. So you do that, but you also set yourself up to make sure that when you get to that point where you say, well, there's this person here I've always wanted to meet, make sure that you are ready to meet that person and that you actually are going to make an actual request. Like you say, well, if I only met this one famous person and they could help me out with this one particular thing, well, kind of stack the odds in your favor a bit and make sure that, but when it happens, kind of realize you're at this unbelievably unique point in time where all these factors intersect. And you say, well, this is like the one time in the entire universe where we can actually, like, I can go up to this person and say, hey, here I am, and I this is what I know of what I'm doing, what you're doing. Can I ask you a question? Can you help me with this? And sometimes that's the whole difference. And doing that a couple of times in a row can make this incredible just change in the trajectory of your career and your life.
We did an interview in 2021 for AWS Community Day. I was like, super nervous at the time. Currently a bit. A few months later, I went to the Heroes event and I opened the door of a Sky Lounge and you were there. And this was the first time I met you in person. But the fun thing was you first said, hey, Martin, how are you? I was like, he knows my name. What's happening here? So that's really cool.
Now that I'm really happy that I was able to do that, because the biggest challenge of being well known is that everybody can know who I am, but that the reverse is really challenging. Like there's one of me, and there are literally millions of people who are like, okay, wow, and we're all connected on social media, but mapping like the social media identity and the face and the aliases, it's the weirdest challenge where you want to make sure that you don't just kind of think of all these wonderful people as like a group, and you want to address them individually, but like mentally it's like there's just not enough like concurrent like processing in my brain to actually be able to store all those and do all that facial recognition. And wow, okay, I saw that person once on this little tiny badge photo and there they are again, or I saw them in black and white and it was a professional photo from 20 years ago, and like let me age them and colorize them, and oh, that's who it is, and like do all that in real time when you're like at this really awesome event. So well, one of those really interesting aspects of I don't know what fame or celebrity or whatever of it's always great to be able to treat everybody as individuals, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm failing at that all the time. It's the weirdest aspect of what do I call it? Personal scalability is this inability to remember like thousands or tens of thousands of names and faces and backgrounds. And so reInvent is always super fun because people come up and they chat and we get to have a wonderful conversation. And most people will kind of remind me if we've met before, and we can kind of resume. But occasionally someone will come up and they'll literally continue a conversation from 2 or 3 years ago with no intro. And I'm like, I'm really impressed that you thought I could actually have that much memory for all these details. I actually don't, but I'm impressed that I kind of fooled you that I might. So one of the really interesting things is this whole scalability enabled by our digital world just taxes our brain sometimes.
And speaking of memorizing stuff, I try to memorize everything about AWS when I sit one of the exams. But I remember the first time I did my solution architect. For me, it was 11 years ago that I passed the first certificate. I also remember from that time that there was an auto increment on the certificate. So I'm sure I'm among the first 1,000 that passed that cert. So I'm really proud.
So many details that you need to learn and understand to pass those. So congratulations. That's great.
Yeah, well, back then there was like a course, and that was enough, like 3-day course. There was some kind of a book, but there only were like 50 to 80 services, but now we are 300 plus. Yeah. So I was also wondering if you have maybe some tips for people in the audience to learn.
Well, I think that you have to be incremental about what you do. And I think looking at the entire roster of services and saying, I have to know everything about every one of these services before I can make any progress is going to be really difficult. I also know that everybody has their own kind of learning mode, where there are some people who will pick up a book and they can almost just read it cover to cover and photographically absorb it, but absorb it and effectively structure that knowledge. Like they're reading it and they're kind of building a data structure in their brain of like these are all the pieces and how they fit together. Others, I tend to really like experience-based learning, where I will often jump into something new with just the littlest bit of preparation and say, let me explore the space a bit and kind of get a sense of what are the big parts and how do they work and how they fit together. And then I'll go back and then I'll read the documentation. And then I'll say, okay, now that I've got this sense of what's there, let me actually use the documentation to help me make sense of what's there. But I do think that the hands-on and the practical side of all this is really important. You can read all you'd like about all these different services and how you go to you write a script, or you write a CloudFormation template, or you go to the console and you click and the following things happen. Reading about it doesn't convey the dynamic sense of what's going on. And this is why when I was writing blog posts, when I was writing for the news blog, which I did for 20 years, very early on, I established with the teams that I had to have access to the service. And this was it wasn't controversial at first, but it's like, well, we haven't launched it. It's not ready. You can use it after we launch. But I quickly realized that each of these services has kind of a feel and a rhythm to it. And you've probably noticed with some services, you hit the go button or the create button, and it makes you whatever you want. And it's just there like in almost as soon as your finger comes up off of your mouse button. Others, you say, okay, make me a new database or a new server or something, new instance. And it initiates some kind of a complex workflow process where it does a thing and another thing, and each of those takes some amount of time. Those steps and that feel are generally not part of the spec or the documentation. And you'd never know that those are there by reading, because it turns out that when you're writing like a document that says, okay, let us tell you all about this particular service, you can't really put an upper bound and say, okay, well, hit create and we'll essentially kind of guarantee that this will be ready within 5 minutes, because the legal department says, well, maybe it could be 5 minutes, maybe it could be 5.5, maybe it could be 6. And you have to be very, very careful to be accurate in these documents, because if you're not, then a customer can say, well, you promised me 5 and it took 6, so I have a big complaint against you. So getting that feel is important. But what I also learned as I was as I was writing about all these is I was never allowed to quote times, but I was able to say, well, let me equate this to some real world activity, which turned out to be more fun. It was like, okay, well, hit the create button and go make yourself coffee, or hit create and go have a leisurely lunch, or go walk the dog, or go check your garden, or whatever you'd like to do. And that kind of set a nice kind of a time frame without being overly specific. And it also gave a nice way to kind of real world kind of like say, okay, here's another aspect of my life. Okay, here I hit the button. I'm going to go walk my dog. Okay, cool. Here's a link to my dog, right? And then you have a little bit of something that's not just dry and technical, but has just a tiny bit of a human interest to it as well.
I do a lot of training, delivery, and at some point I also mention like, hey, I can print the IAM pages, and you get 4,000 pages. Good luck. If you want to read everything about IAM, I guarantee at the end you know everything. But well, to read 4,000 of those pages, that will take weeks. So
there's this interesting paradox that a lot of the AWS documentation is PDF, which was effectively designed for printing. But I have to wonder if some of these documents have ever been printed out in their entirety. Like EC2 is thousands of pages long. I'm sure S3 is thousands of pages long. The days of printed documentation are long over, I have to think, where there's too much. It's not searchable. So but it is funny that having that one nice package is still kind of a preferred way to have documentation. When I was younger, one of the things I would do when I was a teenager and all the other teenagers were just kind of like having fun and doing teenage things, I was always the person with a bunch of manuals in my backpack. And I would always be carrying around 2 or 3. I'd have a processor manual and a language manual and a hardware manual. And I would always have something readily at hand to just pull out and just read whenever I had a free minute to just keep myself informed. And I think with today's pace, you always have to be learning in some way. There's always some new innovation. There's some new information. The challenge sometimes is just like picking and choosing and saying, what do I care enough about? What's interesting to me? What is something that might be useful to me in the near future that's worth putting some time into? So, and that's really important. But to me, equally important is just always be learning. I'll always be kind of recharging your brain and making sure there's something new to learn.
One of the other questions that I always ask the students, somewhere in the middle of the training, like you have heard now 50 services, what is your most favorite service? And I'm actually curious, what is your favorite service?
Oh man, so this is where I get in trouble with all the service teams. Because whatever one I would mention, the other N-1 teams will say, hey, what about us? We thought we were your favorite. And I still go back to the beginning and thinking back to when we launched S3 and EC2, EBS, RDS, those were such fundamental services that when they launched, people looked at that and first they said, wow, that's totally amazing. But then they said, it's kind of obvious that we needed one of these, but we never knew it until we had it. And I think that's a really interesting thing that sometimes building the right product isn't a great surprise of a thing that you invented that is like so off the beaten track that people look and say, I don't even understand what this is all about. Sometimes it's putting that totally obvious in retrospect thing in people's hands and saying, well, of course you wanted to be able to flexibly launch servers. And of course you wanted to be able to store as much data as you wanted to. And of course you wanted to make it really easy to launch a relational database. So I look back to each of those and I can think to very specific moments where I was either writing about them or demoing them. I remember taking a trip once to a big financial institution right as we had launched RDS. And I showed them how to launch a database instance in I think it takes about 5 minutes or so to launch. And it goes through all those different steps as we talked about. And as I do this and the database comes up, I'm just demoing to this small crowd of 3 or 4 people. And they're kind of looking at each other and they're kind of elbowing each other like, hey, look at this. And there was kind of an in joke or an in story I didn't quite understand. And I said, why is this so thrilling to you? And they said, well, we had asked our DBA to set up a database for us 6 months ago they finally set it up for us this week, and they didn't do it right. And you just showed us how to do the same thing in 5 minutes. And that's why this matters to us. And I remember that little demo of just how profound, and this idea of, well, go to the console and select your parameters and click, 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 and create and go, and you've got what you need. And going from the idea to the realization more quickly, that's what this has been about for just so long.
EC2 is one of your favorites, and for me it's actually S3. During one of the re-event keynotes, they showed like the architecture, how S3 was in the beginning and how it evolved over time. And then at the end, you had like an architecture diagram of 200 microservices. And
exactly.
And then, so the architecture already is like very complex, but for the end user, it's still simple storage service. So it's still simple.
Right. Keeping it simple on the outside is one of those really important things. And I know that the team thinks long and hard before adding another API and another. There's so much that you can do behind the scenes and underneath the surface to make things better, faster, more efficient, without changing APIs, without adding new exterior complexity. So the thought is always, what can we do to improve without actually giving the user more knobs to turn and more things to set up. So, but yes, S3's come on an incredibly long way since that 2006. So I guess we're coming up on the 20-year mark next year for both S3 and EC2. Well, that just is, decades can pass really quickly in life. That is something that is really shocking, just how quickly decades can go by. But they've been some exciting decades for us.
Yeah, and I think there are also some interesting things coming, because we haven't used the word AI yet. So
we have not.
I can't believe it, but
we got 22 minutes into our recording with no AI.
I think it's a new record in this year to have a video recording 22 minutes without naming AI.
I think like any other tool, there's a lot of different ways we can look at this. And I've in a lot of my community day presentations this year, I've been focusing on AI as something to help developers, but also trying to put it in a bit of a historical context, and to say that as developers, our role has always been to start with a really cool idea, to turn that idea into some kind of intent of how we'd like to solve a problem, to then express that intent and come out with an implementation. And then once we do that, we can iterate on our solution a couple times to really make it, fleshed out and polished. But then to do that, and to think that over the years we've gone from ones and zeros on our front panel of our computer, to assembly language, to compilers, and to declarative languages like SQL, to now prompts and AI, the core remains the same of start with a great idea and then express your intent. There's more layers and there's more tools in between the intent and the implementation. But the role that we have as a developer is still figure out who our users are, understand what they need, and then decide how to actually solve that problem. To me, there's all this kind of paradox I'm noticing with myself, where as a developer, I've gone through all those different stages of evolution, and I still can go in and program at the assembly language level if I wanted to. I could probably wire some stuff up with digital logic, and it's almost you need to step back and forget about those details and say, I really just want to solve the problem for the user. And I think as developers, we've often maybe jumped to solutions too quickly, and we see a challenge and we may think, well, how would I build that? And like, what services do I want to need? And what data structures and what algorithms and what queries? And then we think, well, that's hard, that's too complicated. I won't bother. But with AI tools, we have to just say, just because I don't really know how to do it, maybe that's not going to get in the way of actually solving the problem. Now, I do want to go back later and make sure I understand how we did solve the problem. I think that's super, super important, to look at what we built and read the code and understand the code. But we can use this as this interesting accelerator that gets us over that barrier where we say, I don't actually know how to proceed because I don't understand, or it seems too complicated. I've gotten great value every time. It's sometimes it feels like you're walking on this interesting kind of this a mountaintop with like steep drops on either side. And if you do everything just right, you can start where you are and you can get to the peak of the mountain and come back safely. Other times you just kind of look to the sides, you're like, this is really kind of scary, and you make one misstep and off you go. Luckily, if you're doing source code control, undo, you can get back there. But we're in the very, very, very early days of this. We have to remember that none of these tools existed 2 years ago, and we're in super early days. They're getting better all the time. But what's also getting better is our ability to use them properly. And like a lot of things, if you step up and give a very vague prompt, you're not going to get a high quality answer, high quality solution. But if you put some time into understanding your customers and who they are and what they need, and putting together a prompt that is detailed and that guides the tool in the right direction. If you use a tool like Hero and you go through the whole spec-driven development process, you're gonna give the tool more information, and the tool can, as a result, you're pointing it in the right direction, and you're helping it to achieve the solution that you want. So you have to be a very active participant in this process. Like almost anything in life, you need to be an active participant in order to get a really high quality outcome.
Yeah, the last time I used AI, I remember, was with a colleague, and the colleague had built an application in a container. And he said, I now want to run it on AWS, and I want to use Terraform, but I don't know AWS and I don't know Terraform. So can you help me? And I was actually typing like generate Terraform script using a container and a Postgres database, etc. And then I posted this to him, and I said, you're programming in this conversation. No, I just asked an AI to generate this code, and good luck with that. And he was really happy because they actually built the whole application also with AI. So there was no code line written by humans in the whole building of this application.
I fully appreciate the value of that, and I think it's awesome. And we're empowering more people to solve problems, which is great. And what sometimes holds me back just a tiny bit is I've always been a person who likes to understand how things work. And from effectively everything up to the age of AI, you could look at the source, you could single step with a debugger, you could look inside, you could read a lot of kind of theory of operation, you could understand it pretty readily based on all the accumulated knowledge of a couple of decades of being in the field. The LLM-based models feel very different in that I've read a bunch of math-based explanations of how they work, and my math skills aren't amazing. So sometimes I'm like, I don't really understand all of what's happening here. And all the transformers, the attention heads, and the vectors and the vector spaces. I have this incredibly vague understanding of what's happening, but I don't fully grasp, like, when you say, okay, do this and this and this and solve this problem and be sure that it uses this and be sure it doesn't use that. Like, there's this gigantic mystery to me it's actually like this very respectful mystery of like, I'm really impressed that it's so powerful that I don't get it. It's not like a kind of like a sadness of like, I don't get it. It's like, wow, this is like so amazing that it can do all this cool stuff, and I don't even know what's going on beneath the surface. It's like, that's super cool and super amazing. And one of the demos I've been doing regularly in my community day presentations is that I've been to a lot of different parts of the world this year. And I've been to Asia, I've been to Europe, I have been to South America. And one of the neat things you can do is you can express the prompts in just about any human language that you can find. And I'm heading off to Switzerland in a couple of days. And I found this very obscure language called Romansh, Romansh, I think it's called. It's so obscure that most of the regular translator tools can't translate to or from it. I found one that does, and I put a very simple prompt in English. I said, write a program to prompt for two numbers, add them, and print the result. I translate that into this obscure language. I went to Amazon Nova, one of our models, put that prompt in there, got a perfectly good Python program out of it. And I've been doing that with every obscure language in every country that I visit. And I don't go with like the mainline language. I find like the one that's kind of like the historic language, or the one that your grandparents spoke, or the one spoken kind of out in the quiet areas. And but the cool thing is, it always seems to work. And I love the point I always try to make is that the models understand all these different languages, even if it's not strictly advertised as understanding it. There's a bit of magic in the training I don't fully grasp that makes them able to still understand it. And that, to me, means that more developers can enter their intent in whatever language they're comfortable in. And so this is an opening up, a democratization, if you will, of these tools, and saying, well, we're no longer saying step one to being a developer in the world is to learn English. We're now saying step up with it, whatever language you're comfortable with, speak that language, and you're going to be able to use it and get good results.
We can continue, I think, for hours talking about AI and all the technology, but I think we also need to end up for now. Well, the AWS Community Day here couldn't happen without the help of all the speakers, of all the sponsors. Do you maybe have any final words to them?
Well, let's say first, thanks to all the organizers for putting in your personal time and energy and motivation to make that happen. I know that I appreciate and respect how hard that is to do, and I'm sure the attendees do as well. It's a little too easy to think of a conference as effectively it's like your IT infrastructure. It's there, it does its thing, and you don't always have to think, well, where did all this come from? But it takes a lot of work for people to put together all that infrastructure so that when you show up, there's tickets and there's signs and there's speakers and there's security and there's great content and there's food and there's swag. That's all like the infrastructure of the event that is kind of similar to the cloud infrastructure. It's just there. Someone had to actually make it happen for you. So appreciate that and respect it. Use the day as a learning opportunity. Learn to connect and network and find other folks that are doing cool stuff like you. Make sure that you are not simply there just to kind of be quiet. You kind of push the edges of your comfort zone a bit and say hi to lots of folks and meet some people and just have a great time.
Here in the cloud, the opportunities to supercharge your business are endless. But where there's the possibility for innovation, there's also the potential for risk. Attackers are looking for any way to exploit your cloud. And the best way to stop bad actors is to think like one. Cloud-native security from SentinelOne enables you to adopt an attacker's mindset and tactics, harmlessly evaluating your environment to surface verified exploits so you can focus on what matters. Cloud-native security is a comprehensive agentless CNAPP that unites features into a single view, giving you instant visibility and insights into your multi-cloud environments. It's so easy to get started. In 5 minutes, you'll be back focusing on what matters to you, your business. Cloud-native security from SentinelOne. Learn more at s1.ai/CNS.
I cannot.
I gave up on it. That is a good question.
I have never found a company with so much like-minded people.
We're a company of nerds, which is amazing. We all have a bunch of weird hobbies.
We really are a team.
It does feel like a family here. We have this tagline, it's the people actually, and I think that really shines through.
Our IT staff at PostNL speak their own language. They use words like
feature flags,
edge computing,
microservices.
Nice, but do they also have an itch word?
Itch word.
Why make me itchy?
API, Kubernetes,
Holistic approach.
AI.
Just use AI for everything.
itchy,
DevSecOps,
DevOps,
Cloud native.
spaghetti code.
A spaghetti code.
Oh.
P1. Jira.
Vibe coding.
Vibe coding.
Look at me, I'm vibe coding.
We're not only exploring the future, we are shaping it.
I was amazed by how quickly we embraced generative AI.
Within 6 months, we built a centralized platform that helps our colleagues to easily realize their Gen AI use cases.
It was not only about doing the most innovative products, but doing it in a responsible way.
What is 9? Sure, it's 6 plus 3, or 5.858 plus pi. But in our world, 9 is the sum of something bigger. Customers come for the code, but stay for the care. Because our code doesn't just run, it sprints. Because we bring the wow before the how. Because when they say urgent, we've already done it. They stay because we don't just close cases, we open relationships. Because we run alongside them to the finish line. Because we celebrate their wins like they are our own. Competitors get nervous, CEOs smile, and investors, let's just say they sleep better. That's why 9 is the magic number. That's Levi 9.
Hi everyone, it's Dorian from Kloya, an AWS Premier Partner. At Kloya, we go beyond the standard cost-saving practices like reserved instances or right-sizing, because we know you already do that. With experience over 400 AWS projects, we have developed an advanced AWS FinOps framework. You can try with zero cost risk. If we can't reduce your AWS bill, you pay nothing. Want to learn more? Visit us at our booth. Thank you.